We are on Ayin Zayin Amud Aleph on the top. So yesterday you discussed that there's a discussion of Hafaras NEDARIM, and there's a question whether you could do it when you have the day. So the Baal or the father, when they have the day, so the question is, do they have the day from the time that they hear, do they just have the remainder of that day? Or do they have 24 hours? So let's say they find out at Shalosh Shidduch time, but let's just say easier, 9 o'clock they find out, so Shabbos is over 9:18, so they have 18 minutes to be made for the neder. Or do they actually have until 9 o'clock on Sunday night to be made for the neder? That's what came out of the discussion yesterday. Fine. Now we're going to see interesting discussion today. Tanan Hassam. We have a Mishnah. Meifirin NEDARIM b'Shabbos v'nishalin l'NEDARIM shein l'tzarech Shabbos. You can be made for NEDARIM on Shabbos, and you can be nishal l'NEDARIM which are l'tzarech Shabbos. Now the difference between hafara and hatara is that hafara will have to be by the father or by the Baal, and he can do it himself, and he can only do it that day. When you have nishalin, so hashala, so that's done by a beis din of either 3 or 1 who's a yachid mumche, who's an expert. Either 1 who's a yachid mumche or 3. And you have to remember, for that one, it's important to keep in mind there is no time limit, because the hashala can be done at any point. But the hafara has a time limit. So the hafara, which you can be made for on Shabbos, but the hashala needs to be l'tzorech Shabbos. Fine. That means l'tzorech Shabbos means for the day of Shabbos. It means she took a neder not to eat challah, and you want her to be able to, you want your wife to be able to eat challah on Shabbos, so that's l'tzorech Shabbos. If she took a neder not to eat peanuts, that's not l'tzorech Shabbos. So l'tzorech Shabbos is, so now you have afar and you have atara. So the question is, meifir nedarim b'Shabbos l'tzorech Shabbos, or dilma afilu shelo l'tzorech. So when we said at the end of the brisa, at the end of the Mishnah, that when you want to do hashala, when you want to do it with, when you want to be matir nedarim, we're just going to use the word matir or hashala for the group of 3, for something that has no time limit. So we said that needs to be l'tzorech Shabbos. The question is that shehein l'tzorech Shabbos going on the beginning too? That means when you do hafara, does the hafara also have to be l'tzorech Shabbos? Or maybe the hafara doesn't have to be l'tzorech Shabbos, only the hatara needs to be l'tzorech Shabbos, but the hafara can be done on Shabbos, even shalol l'tzorech Shabbos. And we'll see in the brisa whether or what exactly the difference is. Tashma, the Tani Rav Chuzudi debei Rav Papi. Ein mafir nedarim el l'tzorech Shabbos. So you see mefurish in a Mishnah, in a brisa, that you can be made for nedarim on Shabbos, but it can only be l'tzorech Shabbos. Fine. So that means that if she find out about the neder 9 o'clock, you can be made for it for 18 minutes. Not only can you be made for 18 minutes, it needs to be something that's l'tzorech Shabbos. Amar Vashi halot nan hachi. Do we not have a mission that says nadra im chashecha mafalat shelo techshach? We had a mission that says that if she takes a neder right before chashecha, if she takes a neder at 9 o'clock, then you only have until 9:18. V'yamar l'tzorech Shabbos in shelo l'tzorech Shabbos. So if you say you can only be made for nedarim l'tzorech Shabbos, my ir chashecha fila b'toch yomin yachol lahafer d'shelo l'tzorech Shabbos. As the Ran explains, if somebody takes a neder at 9 p.m., so is it possible to say that that's l'tzorech Shabbos? There's no neder you're taking at 9 p.m. when Shabbos is over at 9:18 p.m. that is l'tzorech Shabbos. And the fact that we see in this brisa that he could be made for the nedarim for those 18 minutes shows that you could be made for nedarim, first of all, only during that day, but second of all, you can be made for nedarim that are even not l'tzorech Shabbos, because you can't say that the neder that she took now is l'tzorech Shabbos. So you have two contradicting brisas. One says that you can't be made for nedarim ela l'tzorech Shabbos, when you can be made for nedarim on Shabbos only l'tzorech Shabbos. And the second opinion holds that the second brisa seems to imply that you can be made for nedarim that she took at 9 o'clock. You can be made for those nedarim until 9:18 p.m. But it seems like even though those nedarim are not l'tzorech Shabbos, you could still be made for them. So which one is it? Can you get rid of nedarim that are l'tzorech Shabbos, or can you be made for nedarim only that are not, or can you even be made for nedarim that are not l'tzorech Shabbos? Tonight, so we have a brisa, and this is very glatt, very works out beautifully. How far nedarim kol hayom. So we have a brisa that tells us that it's machlokas tonight. Mafaras nedarim kol hayom. Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Eliezer, Rabbi Shimon, Amar me'esel. So they're going to tie this machlokas into the machlokas about how long you have to be made for nedarim in general. Do you have the rest of the day, which will leave you 18 minutes, or do you have 24 hours? What's the difference? L'mandi amar kol hayom in tfeilo afilu shelo l'tzorech haShabbos meifir. Because you have to remember, we have the question of whether you can be made for something l'tzorech haShabbos or not. Does it have to be l'tzorech haShabbos? Well, what exactly is the machlokas? So he's setting up that the machlokas really means whether or not you're going to have time to do it after Shabbos. So he's saying that the one who says you could only do it during that day then afilu tzorech shalol tzorech Shabbos Tzvi. That makes sense. If I tell you that 9 o'clock she takes a neder, and we hold like the opinion that says, if you hold like the opinion that says you can only be made for Nedarim on the day you find out about it, which means mamish that day, even if it means 18 minutes. So if it means that you find out about it at 9 o'clock and you have until 9:18 p.m., so according to that svara, you're going to be able to be made for Nedarim even shalol l'tzara Shabbos, because l'maisa, since you have a time limit and you only have 18 minutes, I understand why you can be made for Nedarim even shalol l'tzara Shabbos. But according to Mandi Amar, who says that you always have aizel, you always have 24 hours, that Mandi Amar will tell you that you can never be made for Nedarim on Shabbos shalol l'tzara Shabbos, because you always have till after Shabbos. So you can come up with a case where the guy finds out about it 2 minutes after Shabbos starts, so he'll have 2 minutes after Shabbos, okay. But a regular case, you find out about it in the middle of Shabbos, you find out about it Shabbos morning, you have until Sunday morning, so then shalol l'tzara Shabbos, we're not going to let you be Mayfair. But if you only have 18 minutes, you only have till the end of Shabbos, so since there's a time limit, and if we say you can't be Mayfair on Shabbos, then by the time Shabbos is over, as soon as Shabbos ends, so your time to be Mayfair the neder ends as well, so that opinion will hold that shalol l'tzarech is okay. And that's where and that's how we are able to figure out the contradiction. So when Razuti the Beira Papi says Ein Mefir Nedarim Ela L'Tzarech HaShabbos, you can't be made for Nedarim except if it's L'Tzarech HaShabbos. So that's going to the opinion that has Me'ez L'Eis. Even within that opinion that you get 24 hours, you get until Sunday night at 9 o'clock. Still, if it's L'Tzarech HaShabbos, we're going to let you do it. But if it's Shalol L'Tzarech HaShabbos, we're not going to let you do it because you'll have 23 hours and 42 minutes after Shabbos to be made for the Neder. But the opinion that holds that you mamish only have 18 minutes until the end of that day, biyom shamo. So that opinion is going to hold that not only can you be made for the Nedarim l'tzorech Shabbos, you can be made for the Nedarim during those 18 minutes shalol l'tzorech Shabbos, because as soon as 9:18 comes, Shabbos is over. But so is your chance to be made for Nedarim. Works very glad. Works very nice. The Ran right across over here on the left says hilkach le'inyan halacha l'didan dekai malon da'afar Nedarim kol hayom mesulo. Since we hold that you can only be made for the Nedarim during that time period, you can only be made for Nedarim on the day you find out about it, not 24 hours. Therefore, Lamaisa, we're going to hold based on what we just said. Mefir Nedarim Shabbos afilu shalol l'tzarech Shabbos. So we're going to hold by definition that you can be made for Nedarim on Shabbos, even if it's not l'tzarech Shabbos, because again, since when Shabbos is over, then the chance to be made for Nedarim is going to be over as well. Therefore, you can be made for Nedarim even shalol l'tzarech Shabbos, the way that we hold. That's important to keep in mind. Good. Right to the Gemara. So now we spoke about hafaras nedarim. Hafaras nedarim can be done even shalol l'tzarech Shabbos because there's a time limit, and as soon as Shabbos ends, your chance is over. V'nishalin l'nedarim shein l'tzarech Shabbos. But you can be nishalin again back in that Gemara. So again, going back to our mission on the top of the daf, Mafir Nedarim B'Shabbos would mean now that it's Nedarim B'Shabbos, even Shalol L'Tzarech Shabbos. But the end of that mission it says, V'nish'alu l'Nedarim Shein L'Tzarech Shabbos. By Hashala, you can only do things that are L'Tzarech Shabbos. So again, L'Tzarech Shabbos you could always do, Hafara Hashala. The question is, Shalol L'Tzarech Shabbos, Hafara fine. What about Hashala? Again, since Hashala doesn't have the time limit, so seemingly everyone would agree that by Hashala, you can only do it L'Tzarech Shabbos. That's what I would think to say. Ibar Lahu. So now the question is, seemingly you could only do it for Tzorech Shabbos, because again you'll have the time after Shabbos because there's no time limit. But when we say that you can do it l'tzorech Shabbos, so the question is, do we still let you do it even if you had time? That means if you were on the golf course on Friday and you didn't have time to be matir the nedarim because you were too busy golfing on Friday, so now you want to be mashal the neder on Shabbos. It's l'tzorech Shabbos, of course, because if it's not l'tzorech Shabbos, nothing to talk about. But the wife was too busy golfing; she didn't have a chance to be mashal the neder, to be matir the neder that she's not going to eat any challah. So now they come to the Rabbi Friday night, and they say, Rabbi, we want to be matir the neder so my wife could eat challah Friday night. Say, what were you doing all day? Rabbi, I was busy, I was on the golf course. So the question becomes, if he was on the golf course all day Friday, is that considered to be a problem? The Ram points out that it would be the same question if the Rabbi was on the golf course all day Friday. If the Rabbi was on the golf course and you just couldn't reach him all day Friday, and you tried calling him and he just didn't pick up his phone. So the question is that considered to be a problem or not? Okay, that's what the Ram is. If they're all out there, then they could have just been mashal and neder together. That's the easiest, if they're true golfers on Friday. So the question is, if you didn't have time before Shabbos, so then you're allowed to do it L'Tzarech Shabbos. Again, it always has to be L'Tzarech Shabbos. Or if you had time, maybe if you had time, this question always comes up, Rabbi, I didn't get a haircut before Chol HaMoed, I didn't get a haircut before Sfira. So what have you been doing? Well, I was on vacation and I was busy and this didn't work. Okay, maybe you should have gotten a haircut. So the same question is, Kishaloy Elam Pnai, if you didn't have time. So if you didn't have time, for sure you can do it. The question is, if you had time and you were golfing, can you still do it? Obviously, again, it's all L'Tzarech Shabbos, but maybe since you had Pnai, you were golfing on Friday, we shouldn't let you do it even L'Tzarech Shabbos. Says the Gemara, first of all, what's the problem with being mashal nedarim on Shabbos. As we'll see in a second, the problem is that when you have three guys getting together, for instance, so what does that look like? It looks like a beis din. We know that midrabanan, you can't judge beis din on Shabbos. You can't have court cases on Shabbos. So if you have three people that are judging court cases, then we'll say if it's the tzarech Shabbos, we're going to make, again, it's not a deraisa, it's a derabanan. So if it's a tzarech Shabbos, we're going to let you go ahead and do whatever you got to do and have the three cases, even though it looks like a court. But if it's not l'tzarech Shabbos, we don't let you. Again, the question becomes, now that it's l'tzarech Shabbos, but you could have done it before, are we going to make that exception and let you guys go ahead and have this quasi beis din even on Shabbos? So the Gemara says, Tashma, dizdakakulei rabbanon lebrei de Rav Zutra, brei de Rav Zeira. They allowed and they annulled, the rabbanon annulled the neder of Rav Zutra, the son of Rav Zeira. Afil medarim shenayalahem pnai. And I can tell you that Rav Zutra, the son of Rav Zira, was not golfing on Friday, but they annulled his vows, even though he had Pnai mi ba'od yom, whatever he was doing on Friday, getting ready for Shabbos. They still annulled his vows, so we see that Nishal and Nidarim, as long as they're Litzorech Shabbos, you can be Nishal them on Shabbos, even Kishahaya lehem Pnai on Friday. Sav Rav Yosef l'meimar, Nishal and Nidarim b'Shabbos. So now we're going to add and we're going to expound this. So as of now, again, Hafaras Nidarim you can do on Shabbos, even Shalol Litzorech Shabbos, because it's going to run out, because there's a 24 hours, you're on the clock, not even 24 hours, as soon as Shabbos over. Hashala you can do on Shabbos, even if you had time before Shabbos, as long as it's Litzorech Shabbos. But now the question becomes, the Shalom Nedarim Shabbos, when you do it on Shabbos, so this is bringing in what I mentioned before, B'yachid mumcha in b'shlosh ediotas lo mishum de mischazei kedina. So Rav Yosef says that when we let you do it on Shabbos, Litzorech Shabbos, even if you didn't have Panay before Shabbos, but we're only going to let you do it with a Yachid mumcha. There's two ways to be Nishal Nedarim, either with a court of three regular guys, or with a Yachid mumcha. On Hataras Nedarim we do a court of three regular Joe Shmos, but it sounds like seemingly if you have one Yachid Mumcha, so you'd be able to go ahead and do it with the Yachid Mumcha. So he says that when we let you to be Nishal Nedarim on Shabbos, which are Litzorech Shabbos, you need to have a Yachid Mumcha, again because of what we said, Mishun de Mischazei Kedina. We don't want you to go ahead and we don't want it to look like you're actually having beis din on Shabbos. Amar le Abai. Abai says, come on, that's ridiculous. Kevan de Sfira lan afilam uman, even since we know from elsewhere that when you're matir nedarim, you can do it again, assuming you have three, you could do it even standing, even though a court needs to be sitting. Afilu bekrovim, you can use even krovim, even though a court in general needs to not have krovim. Afilu balayla, you can be nishal neder even at night. Therefore, everybody knows that when they see three Joe Shmos sitting around and the guys being mashal nedarim on Shabbos, everybody knows that it doesn't look like a court, because we know that it's different than a court case. So lo mischazei kedina, then it doesn't look like a dinah, and therefore three guys can go ahead and be mashal nedarim. Even three guys can be mashal nedarim on Shabbos, since everybody knows that when three guys are sitting there and there's one guy standing, the big mashal nedarim. Reminded me of yesterday. I saw there was a guy, and I went over to him after davening, a young guy, so I could kibitz with him a little bit. I wouldn't do this with somebody else. So I went to him, I said, you were, I saw you schmoozing a lot during davening today. So he says to me, Rabbi, how'd you know? Well, I said, other people that schmooze, they sit in their seat and they just schmooze. You were mom is standing in the back with your back to the aron with three guys looking like you're holding court over there, and I know you weren't holding court over there. And I said, so next time at least just sit down and schmooze a little quieter. He's like, okay, Rabbi, you're right. Nothing I can say to that one. So lo mischazei kedina. So it doesn't look like dina, but what Abaye was saying there is that since everyone knows that when you see three guys and they're being mashil and neder, they already know from the past that it's not exactly like a beis din, because again, it can be done at night, it can be done standing, it can be done with krovim. Therefore, on Shabbos, when you can be doing it, so since it doesn't look like a din in general, and people know that it's not like a din, so they're not going to confuse it for a din, and therefore on Shabbos you could use the three as well. Somebody asked me an interesting question in the first DAF. They said, basically, Hataras Nedarim, how would that work? So it seems like we always sit for Hataras Nedarim. Based on this Gemara, it would seem like Hataras Nedarim can be done standing up. It would seem like Hataras Nedarim can be done even with krovim. It would seem like Hataras Nedarim can be done even balayla. And it would seem that if it's whatever, for whatever reason, Litzorech Shabbos, that Hataras Nedarim could be done on Shabbos as well. That's what seemingly comes out from this Gemara. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav Huna, Amar Rav. Halacha mefir nedarim b'layla. We can be made for nedarim at night. Hamasnisan. What do you mean? We have a meferish brayso that says our Mishnah nedarim b'layla Shabbos. That if you make a neder b'leilei Shabbos, you can be matir. You can be made for it. Ela ema. No, it's going on what we just said before. Halacha nishalim b'layla. Rav is just coming ahead and he's putting a stamp of approval. Then when we said you can be nishal mafir, you can be made for. We said the entire Shabbos for sure, even shalol tzara Shabbos because time's running out. But we're saying that the hatara can be done like it can be done standing, like it can be done by krovim. It can be done even b'layla. And that's what Rav says. Amalei Rav Abba Rav Huna. We'd go with the second way that the Ran explains this. Rav Abba says to Rav Huna, Amar Rav Hachi. Did Rav actually say this again? Because this was quoted in the name of Rav, but it was quoted by Rav Huna. So Rav Abba says to Rav Huna, did Rav really say that the halacha is Neshama Balayla? Amar le ishtik. So he said he was quiet. What does that mean? Basically, when he said to him, he says, Rav Huna says, you said it in front of Rav, and Rav Huna says that he was quiet. Okay, so he was quiet. So Rav Abba says back to him, Amar le ishtik ka'amart. When you said it in front of Rav and he was quiet, was he saying it because he basically was telling you, you should be quiet, you have no idea what you're talking about, and Rav really argued on what you were saying, and he didn't even want to bother because he disagreed with what you were saying? Oh, shti kamert. Or was he quiet because he was basically saying, drink out of the cup that you just told me, i.e., I agree with you. So it's saying basically that even though we usually say shtika keodaha, so Rav Huna was saying, Rav Abba was saying back to Rav Huna, when he was quiet, was he quiet? Basically, again, Rabbi Abba went in front of Rav Huna and said, the halacha is nishalim balayla. Rav was quiet. So the question is, when Rav was quiet, was he agreeing that the halacha is that nishalim balayla, or was he disagreeing? He was basically being quiet to say, you're a Joe Schmo, I don't know why you're saying anything, and he was basically giving it back to him by not even acknowledging him. So was he not acknowledging him, or was he agreeing to what he said? So Amar Rivke Baravin, so he says we have a case where we see that Rav actually holds nishalim balayla. Isdakek le Rav le Rabba. Bekituna de Beirav. There was a case in the base medrash of Beirav. Omei Yechidu Balayla. And Rav said you could do it standing, even Yechidi, a Yachid Mumcha, and even Balayla. So we see that Rav holds that you could be not only Meifir Nedarim, but you could be Mashal Nedarim, even Balayla. Fine. Zok the Gemara. Amar Rabba, Amar Rav Nachman. Halacha nishal nedarim, and there, again we see that it's going to be the halacha. All the things we said. Nishal nedarim omeid yechidi balaylu b'shabbos b'krov v'afilu hayel empnaymi be'od yom. That's everything we said. The question is on omeid, but we have a case which seems to imply that you can't go ahead and be matir nedarim omeid. V'hatanya yord Rabbi Gamliel min chamor. Rabbi Gamliel was on the chamor, and somebody came over to him and said, Rabbi, I need to be matir my neder. And obviously Rabbi Gamliel was a yachid mumcha who could do it by himself. So he said, hold on a second, I got to get off my chamor, we put on his talis, and he was matir the guy's neder. So what do you see over here? It seems to say that Rabbi Gamliel sitting on a chamor is not considered to be standing, and it seems like Rabbi Gamliel specifically came down from the chamor because you can't in fact be sitting when you go, you can't in fact be standing when you go ahead and you're matir neder. We just said you can be standing when you're matir neder. Rabbi Gamliel savar, and this is an important bach, and you see that the Ran changes the gears as well. Rabbi Gamliel savar, ein poschin becharata, me'ikar nadrinan ba'inan ubayi yunei ahachi yashav Rav Nachman savar poschin becharata v'afilu me'uman. Now what's the question? Let's just say this outside for a second. There's two ways you can get rid of a neder. The easiest way is to basically say, do you have regret? If the guy says I have regret, then if you hold that saying I have regret is enough to get rid of the neder, then you're good and you don't really need much concentration. You can do, you have regret? I have regret. Fine, the neder's over. Or you could say no, you don't get rid of a neder by having regret. That's not enough. You need to find another Pesach. You need to find another opening again to find that you went ahead and you in fact did not, again, something was off, or there was information you didn't know, etc., etc. Right? This happens sometimes with cases with a Kohen who wants to get remarried. Sometimes a Kohen wants to marry a woman who was already married, divorced, so they look for Pesach sometimes where maybe something wasn't kosher the first time, something was different than the first time, so that's also a Pesach. So over here we're looking for a Pesach by the neder. So Rabbi Gamliel holds that you can't go ahead and be poseach becharata, and you have to actually find and do a Pesach. Let's read the Ran for a second. For Rav Nachman savar, hachi gartzin on the top line. Rabbi Gamliel savar, ein posel becharata, ela tzarich limtzo Pesach mitoch haneder, ufi shetzarich liyunei bepischa yard min hachama v'yashav. So why did he get off the horse? Why did he get off the chamor? Because you can't just say to the guy when he comes to you and you're on the horse. Again, it takes time, it takes concentration. So it doesn't take concentration to say to the guy, do you have charata? Yes, okay, and then he keeps going on his chamor. But he held that you can't just be poseach with a neder with charata. You have to actually sit down and you have to go through and really work out the details and try to figure out a way that we can get the guy out of the neder. For that, I need to concentrate, and I can't concentrate while I'm sitting on top of the chamor or while I'm standing anywhere for that matter. And therefore, he makes you go ahead and sit on the floor. That's Rabbi Gamliel. Rav Nachman savar posel becharata hilkach ofilu me'umad. But Rav Nachman holds that you can be poseach becharata. It doesn't take much to go ahead and open up the neder by basically saying, do you have charata? That I could do even standing up. Fine. V'chasav Rashba. Listen to this. We hold like Rav Nachman that you could be poseach becharata. That as long as you have regret for a neder, you're out of the neder. Therefore, in general, you don't need to be sitting because because at the end of the day, again, standing is much more chilled out. So if you're standing, you don't have as much concentration, but you don't need concentration because we say you can be matir neder even with charata. Therefore, once we say that you could do it without charata, you could do it even with charata, and even though, so in the case where he doesn't have charata, now we want to go achar psachim latiro, lo baya yoshev, they came into ikar dina meumat, sov dina meumat. So it comes out according to the way that the Rashba is learning, that really when we say, hilacha nishal nedarim omed yichidi balayil v'shabes v'krovim, it sounds like the reason that we hold that you could be doing it omed is because we don't hold like Rabbi Gamliel. Since we hold that you could be poseach nedarim, that you could be matir nedarim even with charata. Therefore, when you have regret, since it doesn't take as much effort on behalf of the dayan to go ahead and ask, do you have regret? Therefore, since in general you could be matir nedarim becharata, so the dayan doesn't have to be sitting down. Even in a case where he needs to go ahead and be poseach, he needs to really go ahead and look because the guy doesn't have charata, he needs to really go ahead and gather information. Since in general we can do it even without gathering information, we can do it with charata. Therefore, we're going to say that in this case he can go ahead and he can do it standing as well. But Rabbi Gamliel, seemingly, who holds that you can't be Basei Becharata, seemingly he would argue with our halacha, and he would say that in general, when you do Hashala, when you do Matir Nedarim, so you actually have to go ahead and be sitting, because all the time you need to go ahead and take careful consideration and really do it be'iyan. That's how the Gemara seems to come out. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav says from Nachman, Chazi Mar Haimi Rabbanan to Asmi Marava Amar. Did you see the following guy from the Rabbanan who came from Bavel and said the following, quote, and this whole thing is a quote, is the Rakule Rabbanan Libre de Rav Huna bar Avin v'Sharle Nidre. The Rabbanan saw the son of Rav Huna bar Avin and they let him go ahead and they annulled his vow. V'Amrule, but they said to the son of Rav Huna, the son of Avin, Ziolu Bayrach Melav Shecha Dechatas, even though we're going to annul your vow, go daven to Hashem for your nefesh, because you sinned. Detani Rav Dimachua de Rav Safra, Kol Anod, Rav Pishu Mekayim Nikrachote, because as we've said in the past, even though we're going to be matir your neder, and we have a good reason to be matir your neder, Alamaisa, you sin by taking the neder. Because as he says, Kol Anod, Rav Pishu Mekayim Nikrachote, if you take a neder, even if you keep the neder, you're still a sinner. Why? Amar Zid Mikra, what's the pasuk? Because the pasuk says, V'chi Techdal Indor, Lo Yeh B'chachet. If you refrain from sinning, you don't have a sin. If you refrain from taking a neder, you don't have a sin. Halo chadal to ikachet. If you don't refrain, you have a chet. Again, seemingly because we're worried that if you take nedarim, you're not going to actually keep them. Zok the Gemara. Tanya. Ha'omer li'ishto. If a person says to his wife, Kol nedarim shetaduri efshi shetaduri. Any neder that you take, I don't want a part of. I don't want you to take it. And again, the Ran points out, as we'll see, that even though it's talking la'asid, it seems like it's saying that you will take, it's really talking about here le'avar, in the past. And we have other examples where it says something in the future when it really means the past. So a wife took a vow, and the husband says, any nedarim that you took in the past, I don't want ef shisha taduri. I don't want you to take those. Basically what's he saying? I want to be made for them. Or he says, ein ze neder. Those nedarim that you took, those are not nedarim. Lo amar klum. It's not klum. Why? He didn't say anything. Why? Because when you want to be made for a neder, you need to say, I am being made for the neder. You can't imply it by saying other things. I don't like the neder you took. It's not a good neder. You need to say, I am being made for the neder. But if she takes a neder and he wants to be making the neder, so then he could say, Yof asisa, good girl. Ve'ein kamotzcha, there's no one like you. Or ve'im lo nadarta madir chani. It's a good thing you took the neder. I like it so much. If you didn't take it, I would have taken it for myself. Devarav kayamin. So in those cases, it's going to be kayamin. We're going to end at the two dots, but let's just see the Ran over here. Look at the Ran, 3 lines from where it gets wide. Uman degaris le'mifarish lebrais sahachi. Haomer le'ishto b'nedarim sha'avru. Ef shishet taduri. So kolomar ef shibahen. Inami de amar la ein zen neder lo amar klom. Why? De behafara lashon mefuraj baya. The first white line in the Ran, because by hafara you need to have a straight out lashon. V'chiketani kol nedarim shetaduri asi b'makom avar. Who, as I mentioned, v'shenadar kamar v'ash chantuba de kavase. It says the future, but it really means the past. Inami, this is just a side point. He says shetaduri dafka v'aliba Rabbi Lez damar bal made for nedarim shlochalo. He learns maybe that the whole brayso is talking about the future, and it's going within the mandamar who says it could be made for nedarim in the future. But pashup shot is that we're dealing with nedarim in the past. V'sefer ketani, and by the by being making nedarim, did he did b'hafara ba'yu lashon mefurash did b'hakama b'chad mehanach lishne detani basar hachisagi by hatara. But when we want to be making a neder, so it doesn't have to be straight out mefurash. V'nira be'enai. So the question we're going to end with is why? What's the difference? Why by hafara do you have to say the words? You have to say I am being made for this neder, and by hatara you can just say being making it, you could just say, "Good job, girl." V'nira be'enai d'taima d'milsa d'kevan d'tanya l'kaman. Because we have another writer later on that says, "Kiyem belibo kiyem," that when you want to be making, when you want to uphold the shvua that she takes, you could do it in your heart, and you can come the next day, and when they said, "Oh, what did you do?" He said, "I was making it in my heart, and that's good enough." Lo gari hani lishna mikiyem belibo. Obviously, if I say "good job," or "I would have done that," that's no worse than being making it belibo. That's going to work as well. Aval behafara kevan d'kaimal hafar belibo eino mufar. If we come to you the next day and say, "Time's up, you didn't do it biyom shamo," and he says, "What do you mean? I had it in my mind, I had it in my heart that I want to be made for the neder." It's not going to work because you can't do it in your heart. There, so too, when you want to be made for the neder, you need to do it out of your mouth. That's nice, but the question just to end with is, okay, but what's the svara there as well? Why, in fact, is it? Very nice that here you need to say it because you need to also not just have it in your heart. But the question is, why, if you can do, why in fact does hafara need to be done straight out? Why can't you do hafara in your heart, but you can do hatar, but you can be making in your heart? So I believe that the simple suggestion would be that it's, again, as we mentioned the whole time, hafara is a much more serious thing. She took the neder. If you're not around, you don't do anything. So the Lamaisa, she still has the neder. You need to be making it. Okay, you have the ability to be making it as a father or as the husband. But at the end of the day, she took the neder. She keeps the neder. So what's the worst thing that'll happen? She'll keep a neder. She's a chote for taking the neder in the first place. But she keeps the neder. By hafara, we need to make sure that if you're made for a neder, then you're doing it the way that God really wants you to do it. We're not 100% sure. We think that God wants you to do it, so we're going to be strict. We're going to be machmir and say, you can't be made for it in your mind. You can't be made for it in your heart. You can't be made for it as an aside. You need to basically say, I am made for the neder. And that's for sure going to be yotze what God wanted. And therefore I suggest that maybe that's why. Since hafara is a much more serious thing, because if you're made for it in the wrong way, and then she stops doing whatever she's supposed to be doing, and she actually is over the neder, then maybe obviously she'll be over the neder, even though you thought you were made for it, unless you're made for it in the exact way. Therefore, made for it needs to come out of your mouth, and it needs to say, I am made for the neder. It can't be a roundabout way, it can't be belibo. But since again, hakama, being making the neder, is something that you're basically just continuing, and she's going to continue to do the neder. So in that case, it could be belibo, and it could be said in a little bit of a roundabout way. This is a new Indian, so since we always have a few extra minutes, we'll pick up here tomorrow and do ayin zayin mabez bottom and ayin ches.